Can't hear.
How about now? Yes. That's 1 for 2. That's not bad. Anyway, hope everyone's having a good time. We expect this to be extraordinary. This is what a town hall is supposed to be about. Now, before we begin, I'd like to recognize a few of the elected officials who are with us here today. Joining us from the county legislature, Legislator Hector Rodriguez. Legislator Amanda Jo Green. Legislator Pete Lauren. And from the mayor, and from the city of Kingston, Mayor Steve Noble. Also joining us are Kingston Alderman Reynolds Scott Childress. The Ulster County Elections Commissioner Ashley Dittis. And representing Comptroller de Napoli, Matt Martinez. And if there's anyone else I forgot, I sincerely apologize.
Mike Hein!
Yes, and I am County Executive Mike Hein. I also want to say a very special thank you to the Kingston School District and the entire staff from Senator Gillibrand's office and my own. Everyone has been amazing coming together to make today possible. Now, just so everyone is clear, as we are moving through this process and we can make sure we serve the most people and are able to ask the most questions, we've hopefully tried to set up a system to make it all fair. When you checked in, you received a numbered ticket. If you wanted to ask a question, you were asked to put at least half of that ticket into the bowl when you signed in. These tickets will be randomly selected, and I will pick 3 tickets at a time and announce the numbers. If your number is called, please come to one of the microphones at the front of each aisle. I will call 3 numbers at a time until the time is out. And please keep your questions brief if possible so we can get as many questions as possible in. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an exciting moment. A town hall in the city of Kingston. A town hall to ask questions to the citizens. A real opportunity to reach out. You see, the last time we had a town hall, we didn't have a congressman. Now that seemed to be a bit of a problem. I can assure you we are in a situation now where we have an extraordinary representative, our senator. Absolutely. In an environment that we are facing today as a nation, in which we see hate and bigotry in places like Charlottesville, in an environment in which we are fundamentally concerned for health care, in an environment we are fundamentally concerned about our nation's sanity sometimes. Because the reality is what is coming out of the White House is nothing short of frightening. The bottom line is this. We have an opportunity to ask questions of an extraordinary leader. We are blessed and absolutely fortunate to be able to come together at events like this and ask questions of an incredible leader. And so, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce from the United States Senate, representing New York and absolutely representing each and every one of you, an amazing human being and my friend, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mike, for your leadership. Thank you for the really generous introduction. And thank you all for coming. I'm so grateful that so many people turned out to the town hall. going to briefly welcome you all and say how important this town hall is to me personally, because I believe that democracy only works when regular people stand up and demand action. And the best way for me to represent you is to have the chance to hear directly from you, so that I can hear your concerns, your frustrations, what you're angry about, what you want changed, why you want it changed. All that allows me to take your voice and bring it back to Washington and make me a more powerful advocate on your behalf. It's your stories, it's your worldview, it's your perspective that is absolutely essential for me to be able to do my job well. So I'm doing these town halls across the state, particularly this summer, because I think people really do want to speak out. And I think things, have been quite traumatic for a lot of New Yorkers over the past few months. I think we've had a lot of difficulty on a lot of the issues being debated in Washington. A president who's taking on institutions in a way we really haven't seen in a long time, whether it's taking on the free press, whether it's taking on the independence of our judiciary, whether it's undermining the right to freedom of religion with his Muslim ban. These are real efforts to undermine tenets of our democracy and things that we've always held sacred and are important to us. And that really came to a head in this healthcare debate, and I just want to crystallize that for you before we get into Q&A. Many of you have seen that the Senate recently rejected the disastrous Republican healthcare bill, which, if you know or don't, it would have taken away healthcare from 15 million people. It would have raised rates in New York. It no longer would have guaranteed that if you had a pre-existing condition, you would have the ability to afford any kind of care. That guarantee was removed. And the fact that that bill was defeated is a testament to people just like you, to regular Americans who stood up and said no to that bill. It was because people they called their congressman, they called their senator, they protested, they went to social media, they just were heard, and they explained to electeds how horrible this bill would have been for them. So that is the silver lining, that I do believe the grassroots is ready to fight. I think people are willing to speak out and really fight against things that will harm them and their people. But it doesn't mean our job's not done, because the challenge with Obamacare is it's still too expensive for a lot of people. I mean, the bottom line is it's too expensive for a lot of hardworking Americans and for a lot of small businesses. And so I think certainly what I'm for and what I'm urging my colleagues to be for is for Medicare for all. To have it the reason why Medicare for All is the solution is because what Obamacare fundamentally was a for-profit system built on the current insurance industry. The insurance industry is largely a for-profit industry. And so their first responsibility is to their shareholders as publicly owned companies. It's to profit, it's to guaranteeing that fat CEO pay and that fat profit margin. And so when their purpose in life is to garner profit and not the health and well-being of Americans, it's never going to ultimately work. You never can have universality and affordability at the same time. It just doesn't work. And so what we're seeing, and our challenge that we have to overcome, is there's many states where there's too few population that there might be too sick, there's no economies of scale, and so insurers can't afford to offer products there. It's not their fault, that's what they're companies. It's part of capitalism, it's part of how they're structured. But if we believe as Americans that medical care should be a right and not a privilege, then you really have to move to a not-for-profit system where that right is guaranteed and that your first goal is care and well-being of the American population. Working towards various versions of Medicare for all, buy-in bills for Medicaid, buy-in bills for Medicare, to get us to a single-payer system, to get us to that place where everyone can have universality and affordability. We're all working on that, and well, not we all. I'm working on that, and many people that I know are working on that, and I hope we can have some real comprehensive debates around the country. this year. With that, now I'm turning it over to you guys. You can ask any questions on any topics. Just when your number gets called, if you still want to ask your question, get in line, and we'll call the numbers if they're repeatedly so that we get enough people to ask questions. Okay. Go ahead, Lon.
Number 377794. Number 377677. And number 376820. Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Sandy Cassetti. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm here today on behalf of the 14 million cancer survivors in this country to say thank you, Senator Gillibrand, I'm choked up, for making cancer a national priority. So here we go again. A new budget proposal will stifle the incredible progress that we're making in defeating cancer. The cuts we know will be disastrous. We know that research saves lives. Every new breakthrough in freeing the world from the pain and suffering of cancer, from new cures to innovative ways to prevent and treat the disease, have one thing in common. The research in some way was funded by the federal government. Yet when adjusting for inflation, federal funding for cancer research has seen huge cuts over the last decade. Increasing funding for cancer research must be a top priority for Congress. The facts are clear. Cancer research saves lives and provides jobs to 32,000 New Yorkers in 27 congressional districts, $2.2 billion in New York State alone. Every major cancer breakthrough in the past 50 years can be traced back to federally funded research. Research on potential breakthroughs in cancer detection and treatment will be halted, which is disastrous proposal. Senator Gillibrand, can we count on you to continue your unwavering support for cancer research? And will you reject any cuts that could lead to major setbacks in our progress to prevent, detect, and find cures for cancer? Yes.
I think many people here agree that Trump's budget is a disaster. The cuts to NIH alone are crippling. And a lot of other cuts of things that are our priorities, so we have to fight for our priorities. Thank you. Thank
you. John Capon from Stone Ridge. My question is a question to stimulate hope. From your position, from your feel of things in the Senate, can you anticipate how soon it might be that a bill would come up that everybody would know that the president would veto, but with the Democratic help it would immediately be overridden? Can you foresee anything like that in the near future?
So the president's budget will not be the budget we vote on. I think, is that your question about the president's budget or a different bill? So Congress will work on their own version of that. The way it's supposed to work is each committee is supposed to come out with their own budget in that field of work. So for example, the Armed Services Committee will come out with its own appropriations and we'll vote on that yes or no. And it's supposed to be in every field, whether it's education or agriculture, but usually that doesn't happen. And what Congress has been doing for a long time is funding continuing resolutions, which aren't great because you don't get to put money where it really needs it. So when we were battling the Zika virus, we really needed more Zika money. We're battling the opioid crisis. We really need more prevention and opioid crisis money. And so there is room for bipartisan work. There is room for common ground. And I'm going to work as hard as I can to build consensus around some of those goals. But we do have a Republican House, and our views might not be heard there. And so it's a time for advocacy and about how important some of these priorities are. Every budget is a statement of values. Every budget is about what you care about and what don't you care about. And one of the things I fight hard for is food stamps. And I can't tell you how often this Republican Congress has advocated and fought hard to cut food stamps. And in our state, #1 recipient of a food stamp is a child. And so we have to push back on our priorities because I'm unfortunately concerned that those priorities will not be reflected in anything that comes out of the House. And so it'll be a bitter fight in the Senate to make sure they're reflected. But speaking out by everyone here is really important in that process.
Okay, 377-779. 377-709. And 377-748.
Hello, I'm Heather Morrison from Kingston, New York. I have been very impressed with everything that you've done as a senator, but especially this past year. You've become so important to people in this area for advocating on behalf of New York in the face of some really depressing things. But I did want to ask you about the reasoning behind your co-sponsoring of the anti-Israeli boycott bill, and why you think that bill doesn't suppress free speech.
So I am someone who supports Israel and wants to make sure that as our only democracy and ally in the Middle East, that they have the resources to defend themselves, that they have an ally, and that anti-Semitism doesn't go unchecked. I think what you saw recently in those riots with neo-Nazis crying out anti-Semitic remarks is something we have to always fight against. And so when I read the BDS bill, I thought it was an extension of existing law. I'm against BDS. I don't think it's a productive way to protest Israeli policies. And the reason I believe that is because it's misused by many people as a platform for anti-Semitism. I think what's happened on many college campuses can be very harmful to Jewish students and has been shown to be very harmful. So my read of the bill initially was very simple, that the 1970 law that was passed was an effort to make sure that Arab League didn't protest Israel and boycott business by U.S. companies, and we didn't want U.S. companies joining other countries' boycotts. And so it was an issue of foreign policy. We didn't want to undermine U.S. foreign policy. The intention of the bill was to say that also should apply to the UN, which is right now trying to institute an international boycott, and the EU. Many people who read the bill, however, were concerned that it undermined free speech rights, just on the plain reading of the bill. Even though courts had said that the underlying law was constitutional, the plain reading of the bill, to many people who I've talked to in these town halls, was that it undermines their free speech rights. I will never support anything that undermines free speech rights. And so because of that debate in our state and among constituents, I took my name off the bill. I've urged the writers of the bill to change it so that we can, because I would like to say I'm against BDS, and I'd like a proper, appropriate place to say that, which is what I thought the bill said. Because of the confusion and concern about the ambiguity of the language, I would like the bill to be rewritten, because I don't support BDS, because I think it has been used as anti-Semitism. And we have to protect people in this country. We have to stand up against hate speech wherever it's found. And I thought initially that was a way to do that. But given the ambiguity, I've taken my name off of it. Thank you.
Number 377-680. Number 377-750. And number 377-784.
Hello. Hi, my name is Davis Tuchin, and I'm from Kingston, New York. And as I was driving here today, I had no intentions to ask a question, but when I was at the traffic circle near the highway, passing me was a black pickup truck with an American flag and a Confederate flag. The Confederate flag terrifies me. I was in Richmond recently, and seeing these statues along the boulevard made me say and think, excuse me, I'm very nervous, that the Civil War is still being fought. It was over a long time ago. And this is very painful to all of us in the United States. I'm also Jewish, and the Jewish holy days are quickly approaching. My synagogue is going in Woodstock, will have 1,000 people there. There are also Muslim mosques in this area. There are Catholic churches, Christian churches, attended both by blacks and whites. There are Hindu temples, Buddhist temples, and Buddhist centers. We heard language that was very unfriendly and very mean towards all of us by these people who drive around this town with the Confederate flag. So I would like to know, what is our government, both federal, state, county, and local, going to do to protect us innocent people who are good citizens from the people who are chanting such evil? Thank you.
It's incumbent upon all of us to fight against that hate. And it is my responsibility as elected leader, as is Mike's, but all of us as citizens to actually fight against hate in our state, in the country, and to speak out when our leaders support it, such as what President Trump did. We have to call it out, and we have to demand that people not only protect one another, but speak out against hate crimes. We have seen an elevation in hate crimes, and you know this from law enforcement, throughout our state over the last several months. There's been an increase in all hate crimes. Swastikas written on playgrounds. KKK written on someone's garage door. Someone who had an LGBT flag in their house torn up on their lawn. These are things that happened in our state. 2 Muslim women shopping at a grocery store, being bullied by other people in the grocery store. On subways. We've heard these stories over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak out no matter when and when it happens, no matter where or when it happens, as wrong, making that moral judgment to say, no, we do not support white supremacists. No, it is not equal. There isn't 2 sides, there's 1 side. And that is what we are called to do. And so I will be your ally in this fight, but all of us have to stand up. And when we see it in our neighborhoods, we have to speak out against it. When we see it in our communities, we have to speak out against it. It is our job as Americans. We are a country founded by immigrants. We are a country that celebrates our diversity. We are a country that's founded on religious freedom. And any tenets that just try to destroy that, any efforts to try to destroy that, are destroying our basic tenets of our Constitution and our democracy. So this is our country. We have to speak out and fight for it. And we should not be shy, and we should not be afraid. We should be bold. It is necessary. It is a necessary time to stand up against it. Whether it comes from the highest office in the land, or whether it comes from our local community, we have to stand up.
Dandy from Kingston, New York. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, there are 623 white supremacist, nationalist, and alt-right armed extremist militias in the United States. At least 2 dozen of these militias are in New York State. And in addition to being armed, all of them have been emboldened by what they perceive as an endorsement for the president following his morally bereft statements concerning the deadly march in Charlottesville and his recent pardoning of a racist sheriff. With the National Guard and armed services under the control of the presidency, what are we doing by way of legislation, state assistance, or other means to help protect normal citizens from this growing threat?
Should you restate that question? Are you concerned about our National Guard?
I'm concerned about our ability to respond to military or militia attacks on ordinary citizens.
Well, I do have faith in many of our institutions. I do have faith that our law enforcement will come to the need of any community who's being attacked or is at risk. I do believe our Department of Justice will continue to function regardless of who the Attorney General is and regardless of who the President is. I do believe the statements that the President has made about Charlottesville are abhorrent. I do believe the pardoning of the sheriff is outrageous. And so we need to speak out against those things, and continuing to be heard on these issues is necessary. But I believe there are many public servants in law enforcement who are there for all the right reasons, who will protect this country. I believe men and women who are serving in the military will protect our country. And so I believe our institutions will survive this president. I pray that doesn't happen, but you have Congress to stand up and do what it will take to unwind that kind of action.
May I call you Professor Gillibrand?
Yeah, yes.
Because you seem very articulate. I lost my voice this morning. I guess I was watching The Godfather or something. I'm completely apolitical, and I'm becoming a little bit more asocial. I think that's the word. Although I'm hearing from all these people, it's a little scary.
Great.
I did have a question. My first question, I'm going to paraphrase it because I'm going to drop that second question. But the first question was, anyone in public office, anyone, not board members, in Woodstock we have Gillibrand, an interesting fellow. Anyone in public office, who should they read first? Plato, all of Plato, or a little bit of Machiavelli? That was my first question. We dropped that question. Here's my other question. I hope you have a sense of humor. I hope I have a sense of humor. What did this man, and I hope he's wrong, he said it in 1941, he's world famous. What did this man say about America? And his name is Sigmund Freud.
Sigmund Freud did what for America?
What did he say about America?
I don't know. What did he say?
Oh, the lady back there, she knows.
Yell it out. Tell us. What did Sigmund Freud say about America? Let me Google it.
Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
So your first question, should you read Plato or Machiavelli first? The answer really is you should read both, because you need to know what's going on in the world, and you need to know how to handle problems and what's going to come at you, is my view.
Okay, 377-782. Okay.
Okay, do you want me to hold it, or? Okay, good. First of all, Senator, thank you for coming today, and also thank you for all the work you've done for the Alzheimer's Association. I saw you in DC at the beginning of the year, and I saw you came to the meetings after we lobbied for 3 days, and I appreciated that very much. My name is Melanie Whaley, and I am a chairperson for an activist group in Dutchess County, ITFIO, and we're doing a lot of work. And you started speaking today and referenced the activists and the volunteers and the people that are speaking up or what's happening. So my question came from a quote I first read this morning. In politics, failure to extend any care and feeding to the grassroots results in poor harvests of votes. And that made me think that my question is, there seems to be a lack of new ideas on how the Democratic Party can connect with the mood and concerns of Americans. At the same time, there is a tremendous amount of energy and activity on the ground by grassroots activists who are very connected to their communities. right now, what we are doing and what you are doing feels disconnected. Do you think it would be constructive for us to work more closely together? And are you prepared to invest in that relationship? Thank you.
Well, of course, I intend and will work with the grassroots, because as I started out my remarks, democracy only works when regular people are involved and are speaking out and speaking up. And I think what's happened since this election is remarkable. I mean, it really started with the Women's March. How many people marched somewhere for the Women's March? Exactly. It was a moment in our history when millions of people marched around the globe. And what was so powerful about the Women's March is that it was intersectional. It didn't matter what you marched for. Your sign could have said Black Lives Matter. Your sign could have said LGBTQ equality. Your sign could have said women's reproductive freedom. Your sign could have said clean air, clean water. It didn't matter. Whatever you marched for was your issue, and you felt it needed to be heard. And what was so brilliant about it is that people became active who had never been active before in their life. People were willing to put their issue on a sign and hold it up for all to see when they never would have said a word otherwise. It was very, very powerful. And what's continued is that activism, and that's the only reason why we don't have Trump here today. It was because regular people marched, they looked up Indivisible, they saw where there was a town hall, they turned up. They started calling their congressmen, they started showing up outside their offices, they started making trips to Washington. Like, it really hasn't stopped. And that's why we had enough courage by Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and then John McCain to defeat that horrible bill. So the grassroots is working, and it's working brilliantly. And I do think that Democrats' job right now is to listen a lot more and work a lot harder. That is how you become number in tune with the grassroots, know exactly what's on people's minds, and will develop your issues to fight for. Your job is to represent and to hear and to solve real problems, not made up problems, not problems that you think are the problems, but the problems that people actually describe to you. And so that is what the party needs to do. That's what any elected leader needs to do. And so I will work with you guys in any way that you want going forward to make sure people are heard. It's really important to me that I hear from you, that people feel represented, and that we're fighting for the right outcomes and fighting for the right solutions. And that's why I think these town halls are so important. And I'm grateful for all the work you've done, so thank you.
Numbers 376, 816, 377, 741, and 377, 782.
Hi, Senator Gillibrand. In view of the fact that President Trump used the pardon power in an unprecedented, purely political manner, and there is a pretty good possibility that it will use that same power to preemptively pardon any damaging witnesses in the Mueller investigation, do you see a role for the Senate or other branch or agency of government in somehow putting constraints on this potential impunity and abuse of power?
I do think the president's recent pardon of the sheriff was an abuse of power, and I think what he did is morally wrong. And I share a concern that this pardon power could be used inappropriately as well. So I do trust Robert Mueller to do his full investigation. I believe he will get to the bottom of these allegations of collusion and obstruction of justice. And if he is fired prematurely, I think it will create a constitutional crisis. I think it will be a line that cannot be crossed, and I think it will be something that is seen on a bipartisan basis as wholly inappropriate and an abuse of power, and I believe there will be consequences. And so I do think if that did happen, as you described, there would be a very significant role by Congress.
Good afternoon. thank you for coming to Kingston. My name is Ann Bailey. I'm a business owner here in Kingston, New York. I'm on the Kingston Arts Commission and part of the Midtown Arts District. But my question today is about another issue. I'm head of a task force for disabled adults, and there is a new rule that's been written called the final rule. Several friends of mine have chosen for our children to live in a more agrarian setting in a Waldorf-style community. And I'm very, very concerned about the future of these communities because they're being challenged by this rule as not being appropriate.
Is it a federal rule or a state rule?
Federal. So my question to you is, would you be willing to talk to Chuck Schumer about this? I know this is very specific, and I'm not going to take up much more of your time, but if you would write it in your book, many of us in the Camp Hill community are very concerned, and we would like the opportunity to talk to you, talk to your office, tell you why these communities are important, and why farming and agrarian living is a wonderful option with people with severe disabilities. So thank you.
I'd be delighted to work with you on this issue. And David Connors, who's going to stand up as our regional rep, along with Susan Spears. Susan, over here in the corner. We can set up a meeting for sure, so you can brief my staff, and I can see how I can get involved. But I agree with your premise that for a lot of special needs kids, for a lot of folks with disabilities, for a lot of our veterans with PTSD trying to heal, they do exceedingly well on farms. They do well with horses. They do well with other animals. There's so much work being done in our state right now on that issue, and it's working really well. Combining special needs kids with learning about farming has worked really well in one place in the Hudson Valley. PTSD vets working with horses is working really well in the North Country. So we've got some wonderful providers around the state who share your goals. So I'd be delighted to work with you on that.
Thank you, Senator, for coming and meeting with us today and taking your questions. My name is Joel Longnecker. I live in Red Hook. My question is, I was shocked, I think it was last Tuesday, watching the president's rally in Phoenix when he made an off-the-cuff remark about shutting the government down over the southern border wall. As we all know, he promised for years now that if there's going to be a wall, that Mexico was going to pay for the wall. I think we all knew that was absolutely crazy and not going to happen. Now that that clearly is not going to happen, he is threatening a shutdown if we, the taxpayers, don't pay for the wall. So I guess my question is, I'm really looking for a response about that, and what do you predict? I know the next coming weeks, the month of September, is supposed to be a really difficult time. There's many issues coming up, and it looks like that could be a big one.
Well, I intend to make sure this government does not get shut down. I intend to work very hard to make sure we continue to pay our public servants and keep all our public safety open and available to the people. And I intend to fight against paying for a wall. I think it is a hateful, horrible policy that will never, ever work. So my prediction for you is we will defeat President Trump on this issue, and I believe Senator McCollum said this week that he intends on not shutting down the government. So I think we will prevail, but again, this is about the American people speaking up, speaking out, making sure people know how you feel about this, and we're going to have to fight this wall for a long time. I think this is something President Trump intends to keep working on and trying to fund, and so he'll attach it to any must-pass bill and pressure his colleagues to do it. And he is not beyond twisting arms of House members in our own state. So I hope that we can stand up and say no and fight against it and are heard, because this is an issue of values. Again, who are we as a country? I do not believe we should be building walls.
Okay, enough the last three questions. 376-793, 376-773, and 377-736.
I'm Eleanor Pupko from Rhinebeck, and I was wondering if anything can or is being done to slow down this onslaught against any and all the regulations.
So unfortunately, this is one of the consequences of elections. President Trump has chosen to put people in his cabinet who, in my perspective, from my view, were either not qualified or stood for things that are frankly antithetical to my values. And every single one of these cabinet members is in charge of agencies where they get to change regulations, where they get to change what's going to be enforced and what's not going to be enforced. I think what Jeff Sessions is doing is horrible. I think what Scott Pruitt's doing is horrible. I think what Betsy DeVos is doing is horrible. So you've got each of these cabinet members undermining the role of their agency. I mean, Scott Pruitt is trying to unwind any regulation that ensures clean air and clean water. He's trying to unwind any national park President Obama created, take away those lands, put them up for mining. He is literally undermining every job the EPA is supposed to be doing. And unfortunately, it's harmful, and it's very harmful to the people of our communities, harmful to the future of this country, harmful to our children. So there's very little we can do to stop agency heads from doing what they want to do. Some things have to be laws, and so, for example, what he's trying to do in banning transgender in the military, I'm going to try to write a law to stop him from doing that, because I think it's so and so we have to fight back. I'm going to do everything I can do legislatively. Every one of us should do everything we can do by speaking out. But it is the consequence of this election, is there's going to be a lot of regulatory work he can do unless we unwind it through legislation, which means we need to pass it through a Republican Congress, which means our best thing we can do is focus on 2018 as a way to still. But I think for each one here, our goal is to make sure our voices are heard on every platform and every place we can, and be active in electing people who share our values, and that's all we can do. But this cabinet is a dangerous cabinet. What he's doing through the agencies and his effort to unwind President Obama's rulemaking of the last 6 months of administration is real. And so the only thing we can do is pressure Congress not to do those things, or pressure Congress to pass a law that can at least unwind what President Trump's doing. That's all we can do. But it's not insignificant, and it doesn't mean it won't work. And if you remember, Congress, when it came into session, the first thing they wanted to do was unwind the ethics panel that created oversight over them. Well, there was such an outcry that they had to unwind that within a week. So our voices do matter, and so do not be shy when they do things that you hate or that you find offensive or that you find will harm the future or our communities. It's really important to speak out.
Thank you for coming. My name is Craig Moss. I just want to follow up on a comment you made about sort of winning. Obviously, the Democratic Party has had losses since 2008, both nationally and locally, with some exceptions. there has been some concern about the Democratic leadership and I'm a geriatrician, the geriatric nature of them, and whether there will be some new blood at the top. I think there's been polls, and I'm sure you've seen them, about Congresswoman Pelosi, whether there should be new changes on that. So I just wanted your comment on how you see, and this is what other people have been talking about, the Democratic Party moving forward in the future.
Well, my view is a little different than your view. I think change happens from the grassroots up. I think every issue that people from the grassroots up are fighting for are the issues that we should be fighting for. And so I don't really worry about who's in charge of this committee or that committee, and I really don't even worry about what the party's gonna do so much. What are the people gonna do? And what are we gonna do? And how are we gonna rise up and fight back? And what are we gonna say and what are we gonna fight for? Because we are the party of the people. And so when candidates run strong campaigns, it's because they're listening to the people they're representing. It's because they understand what the biggest problems are and they're fighting to solve those problems. And so what we need to do as a party is listen and fight harder to pass real bills. We were in charge for a while. Did we pass a minimum wage bill for $15 minimum wage? No. Did we pass a national paid leave bill? No. Did we make sure we had Medicare for all, or at least begin to fight for it? No. So there's things that we need to do better. And that's our problem, not so much just who's in charge of any given committee, is my view. And so my responsibility is to find the things that can make New York a stronger state, things that can make our country move forward, and fight like heck for those things. And really, really try to find the bipartisan support that's necessary to pass bills that help people. Our job is fundamentally to help people. And so I don't worry so much about partisan stuff. I don't really worry so much about who's in charge of this or that. I really worry about, am I serving you? Am I listening? Do I understand the problems and are fighting for the right solutions? And the more we spend doing that, I promise the more we will start winning.
Ladies and gentlemen, how about one last one? 376774.
So if anybody wants a picture, you can have it. So I'm going to stand up here and take photos for anybody who wants it. And if you have a personal question that you didn't want to ask in front of everybody, you have a second to do that. It'll take the rest of the time, I promise you.
Hi, Senator. My name is Sharon.
Yeah.
Hey, my question is getting back to one that you answered a little earlier, which is about the Israel anti-BDS legislation that went through your sponsorship from.
Can't hear you.
I appreciate very much you standing up for our First Amendment rights as individuals. However, there are several Supreme Court rulings that say that the right to boycott, and I'm not talking about sanctions, I'm making a distinction between boycotts and sanctions. Boycott activity under US law extends to corporations too. So will you stand up and say that you will also support the right of corporations in the US to their First Amendment rights, to their political views not being sanctioned through fines, through prison terms, which is what this legislation lays out?
No, and I'll explain. I do not believe that corporations have free speech rights. I do not believe, I get you, and then you can tell me what I believe. I'll just tell you what I believe, and then you can disagree with it. I do not believe they have free speech rights. I don't believe that money is speech. I don't believe that companies can put unlimited amount of money in campaigns. I know, the same Supreme Court decision. That Supreme Court was a very conservative, leading court that is not representative of the rest of this country believes. I don't believe corporations have free speech rights. I just don't. And so no, I'm not going to help give corporations free speech rights. I'm not. I don't believe it, because what happens is when your company that you work at believes you don't have reproductive freedoms and believes you shouldn't have the right to marry the person you love and doesn't believe you have the right to have the control over your body, you've just given those rights to get free speech rights. That is where that law goes. So I don't like that law. I think it's a bad law, and my job is to fight against that law. And hopefully we have strong enough elections over the future of this country so that corporations don't have free speech rights. They don't deserve it. They're not people.
That's not the Supreme Court decision I'm referring to. I'm referring to two much earlier Supreme Court decisions. One was Pickering, and the other one was the rights of... Basically, these two Supreme Court decisions are from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and what they say is that the federal government does not have a right to penalize a corporation based on their political views. So it's Pickering versus School Board, and the other one is O'Hare Trucking versus Chicago. Those are two Supreme Court rulings that have said that corporations, not that they have the same rights as individuals, that's not the Supreme Court ruling. It's that any authority, be it local, state, or federal, is not allowed, under First Amendment rights, they're not allowed to penalize a corporation based on their political views. That is what the Supreme Court has made that ruling. So if the new Israel anti-BDS law tends to penalize corporations for their political views, that is against the First Amendment. And I want to ask you one final question. If you are for individual citizens being able to boycott, to express their opinions through a BDS boycott, how will we do that if we don't want to buy Sabra hummus from ShopRite or SodaStream from Lowe's? But Lowe's won't be able to not stock it. ShopRite will not be able to not stock Sabra hummus.
That's not what the law says, and it's not what the 1970s law said. It basically was intended to not undermine U.S. foreign policy because we want to support Israel as the only democracy in the Middle East. That was the point of the law. No, it was for all of it. But you always have that right. Any individual has a right never to buy something that's made in Israel. You have that right. And a company has the right to not buy anything made in Israel if they don't want to. They absolutely have those rights. No, they have every bit of free speech rights to never buy something made in Israel. That is absolutely their right, company or individual. What they can't do is join, what the purpose of the bill is to do is you can't join the UN sanction and say, we want to be part of the sanction and here's 100 companies that we would like you to blacklist because they do buy things from Israel. That's the purpose of the law. So it's about a blacklist that the UN's creating that is unsettling to many people, and it's about not letting companies undermine U.S. foreign policy. But it is not intended to take away your free speech rights or the ability of a company not to buy products from Israel. They can do whatever they want. You just can't join an international boycott led by a country like the Arab League in the 70s and individuals like Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries, or in this bill, the intention is EU or UN, because UN is creating that list right now. But that's all. So I will protect your free speech rights to the end of the earth. You never have to buy something from somebody you don't want to, and I will stand in front of a bus to make sure that is your right. And it's true for a company. They don't have to buy it. They just can't join the international boycott. But as I said, the way this bill has been written, it's given you grave concern. It's given many New Yorkers a grave concern. And so until they fix it, I will not be on that bill.
So you will not support any future iterations of the anti-BDS law, Israel Anti-BDS Act, if it in any way impinges corporations' right to support BDS in the U.S.
As long as they're not joining a UN or an EU boycott resolution. Nobody has to buy products from anywhere. Like, that is just a fact. That's American. Nobody has to buy anything they don't want to buy. No one's telling you can't buy something or you have to buy something. That will always be the law of the land. That is not the intention of that bill. really do appreciate this, and this is the kind of issues that people want to debate. And everyone here raised issues that were very important to them, that they feel very passionate about, and I'm very grateful because, again, I can't do my job well unless I have these conversations with you, hear directly from you, and understand really what the pulse of the community is. I have enormous faith in this country because the grassroots is so active. I have enormous faith and hope for the future because all of you are so passionate about what is needed in this country. And my hope and prayer and what I beg of all of you is please don't be silent. This is a time when none of us can be silent. We must speak out, we must be heard, and we must make sure that we protect the institutions and the values that we hold so dear. So thank you for being here today.